When we imagine scenes of men and women fighting and killing one another over religion, we might think of France 400 years ago, or Northern Ireland in the 20th century, or Iraq in the 21st. But Pennsylvania, the place where religious toleration, freedom of conscience, and the separation of church and state were enshrined from the very beginning. Yet during two separate week-long riots in May and July 1844, Philadelphia became the scene of the deadliest conflict over religious and ethnic issues in the nation's history. Native-born Protestants and Irish Catholics turned the streets of Philadelphia into a war zone. When the fighting had subsided, at least 25 residents lay dead and more than 100 wounded. Dozens of homes and 2 churches had been burned down. At the end of the first week of rioting, a writer for the Pennsylvanian reflected on the scene. Sunday in Philadelphia, soldiers marching and counter-marching in the streets, not for display or peaceful purposes, but prepared for actual battle. Such is a Sunday in the 19th century in the city of Philadelphia. Religious toleration enforced by loaded muskets, drawn sabers, and at the cannon's mouth. Point. What prompted this violent conflict? In short, it was provoked by a bitter controversy over Bible reading in the public schools. A steadily growing Catholic community began to ask that Catholic children be excused from the required reading of the Protestant Bible and other forms of worship during the school day. But they made this appeal at the very moment when movements that opposed Irish immigrants and Catholics were rising in popularity. This timing proved to be flammable and revealed the fragile state of religious toleration and the as yet unsettled relationship of church and state in Pennsylvania. Throughout American history, freedom of religion has been a dynamic process rather than a static guarantee of equal rights. It has emerged only through the continuous struggle of small groups of outsiders demanding recognition of that right. Until the 20th century, this struggle was waged on the local and state level rather than through the guarantees of the First Amendment or the protections of the U.S. Supreme Court. During the first half-century of the Republic, the wall that separated religion from public life was more porous than we might expect. Several New England states, for instance, had state-established churches, with ministers' salaries raised by local taxes, well into the 19th century. Everywhere in the United States, the degree to which religion intruded into public life and government had its hand in religion was determined by local customs and state constitutions. It is true that Pennsylvania had begun as the most tolerant colony in the New World. William Penn and his fellow Quaker founders designed a colony where all religious communities could worship freely. With the most democratic of state constitutions in 1776, Pennsylvanians pronounced in their Declaration of Rights that all men have a natural and unalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences and understanding, and that they could not be compelled to support any religious worship against their will and consent. Still, the Commonwealth did not have an inviolable wall between religion and government. The guarantee, as first stated in Pennsylvania's 1790 Constitution, that no preference shall ever be given, by law, to any religious establishments or modes of worship left open the possibility that various local customs by which religion entered public life such as incorporating religious worship into public school teaching could remain in practice, since they were not imposed by law. For more than a generation after the American Revolution, Bibles and schools were the twin cornerstones of an evangelical religious culture in the United States. Philadelphians founded the nation's first Bible Society in 1808, and the city became the headquarters for the American Sunday School Union in 1824. Evangelical Protestants insisted that religious instruction, including Bible reading, for children was the best guarantee of preserving self-government and civil liberty in a republic. So, when Catholics began to demand the civil and religious liberties guaranteed under the Pennsylvania and U.S. constitutions, they exposed the contradictions between a Protestant national culture and Republican freedoms. In response, anti-Catholic activists called nativists unleashed a propaganda campaign to demonstrate that Catholics were natural enemies of the Bible and, hence, unfit to be American citizens. Philadelphia was home to 2 distinct groups of nativists, each with different motivations and constituencies. Religious nativists mostly Protestant clergy fanned the fires of antipopery among Protestants. They were not averse to spreading sensational tales to suggest that Catholic priests threatened to bring social and sexual disorder to America. Political nativists, on the other hand, were primarily concerned with the boatloads of newly arriving Irish immigrant men and their political influence in a new era of participatory democracy. They built a new political party, the American Republican Party, popularly known as the Native American Party, with the principal objective of raising the residency requirement from 5 to 21 years, before an immigrant could become a voting citizen. The Bible in the schools controversy joined these two groups into a dangerously volatile mix of anti-Irish, anti-immigrant, and anti-Catholic sensibilities. It was within this climate that Francis Patrick Kenrick, Bishop of the Roman Catholic Church in Philadelphia, ventured to make the city's common schools acceptable to Catholic parents and children. In a letter to the school board in 1842, Kenrick voiced Catholic objections to the sectarian features he perceived in a common school education. Teachers opened and closed the school day by reading from the King James Bible or singing a Protestant hymn, and they used the Protestant Bible as the text for reading instruction. Kenrick appealed to the school board on the grounds of freedom of conscience. The school law, which provides that the religious predilections of parents shall be respected, was evidently framed in the spirit of the Constitution, which holds the rights of conscience to be inviolable. Public education should be conducted on principles which will afford its advantages to all classes to the community, without detriment to their conscientious convictions. Kenrick insisted that he was not demanding an end to Bible reading or the expulsion of the King James Version, only that Catholic children be allowed to read from a Catholic Bible and be excused from Protestant forms of worship. The school board responded with a two-part compromise that pleased neither side. They exempted students whose parents are conscientiously opposed from required attendance at daily Bible readings and approved any particular version of the Bible, without note or comment. The board's decision might have freed Catholic children from being forced to read the Protestant Bible, but at the same time banned the Catholic, Douay, version of the Bible, since it contained commentary. This misunderstanding cut right to the core of the differences between Protestants and Catholics. Protestants encouraged everyone, children included, freely to read and interpret the Bible. Catholics viewed the Bible within the context of the Church, meaning children should read only a translation of the Bible that was authorized and explained by the Church. Meanwhile, most Protestants found it hard to understand why anyone would call public schools sectarian. After all, in their minds, the schools did not teach the doctrines of any specific denomination. They relied on a populist claim that the will of the majority should rule in a community, an assertion that continues to appear in church and state disputes in the present day. Kenrick and Catholic political leaders hoped for equal access to a Catholic version of the Bible, but they would have settled for no sectarian practice in the schools at all. To Protestant nativists this represented a conspiracy to kick the Bible from the public schools and an ominous sign that growing numbers of Irish Catholic immigrants represented a threat in their midst. In 1844, Walter Colton, an Episcopal Navy chaplain, penned an inflammatory tract entitled The Bible in the Public Schools. "We must never forget," Colton exclaimed, "that this is a Protestant land." He anointed schools the battleground for preserving a Protestant culture and called on every native-born American to stand by these schools and protect them, as he would his heart's blood. When an Irish Catholic alderman and school director in Kensington, Hugh Clark, was accused that same year of ordering a teacher to stop reading the King James Bible, a spiraling sequence of events led to bloody violence in Philadelphia's streets. The first riots began in the industrial district of Kensington, home to a large concentration of working-class Irish immigrants. Political nativists planned a mass rally at a site near a schoolhouse, around the corner from a Catholic church, and 2 blocks from the home of Hugh Clark. Not surprisingly, angry Irish Catholic locals outnumbered the 300 nativists, and they shouted down the speakers and drove the nativists from the rally site. 3 days later, on Monday, May 6, nativists returned to the same location with a crowd of 3,000 intent on defending their right to assemble and speaking out against the threat that unrestrained immigration posed to American democracy. Crowds on both sides pushed and shoved until the rally devolved into a full-scale brawl. An American flag was allegedly torn in the scuffle, and moments later someone, it was never determined from which side, fired the first shot. Gunfire and missiles of bricks and stones were exchanged for the next hour until the sheriff restored order. By then 5 nativists had been shot. For 3 more days anti-immigrant groups stoked the fires of anti-Catholic sentiment in newspapers and